Good afternoon, this is Angela with Parkrose Permaculture. Perfect day to be tempted outdoors to work in the garden. A note to some of my local Portland gardening friends, because this question has come up this weekend. It is far too early to be planting your eggplants and peppers and tomatoes and tomatillos outside. Soil temperature too cold, air temperature at night far too cold. But that doesn't mean there's not stuff you can do in your garden right now. I actually was tempted to run to the plant nursery and make some irresponsible purchases today. It is my birthday weekend, so I thought I would treat myself to a few things. I was actually looking for a plant called London Pride, which is Saxifrage ex herbium. It is a very common cottage garden flower that flowers beautifully in early spring and slowly spreads and is low growing. It's very hard to source it in the States. However, there are many, many other kinds of saxifrage that are in every nursery. So I've had to settle with not being able to find my London Pride, and instead I went and purchased a different kind of saxifrage. Now I have some saxifrage AC in the front yard as well, but this is a different variety. And I thought I'd share with you a little bit about why you might want to grow this plant and some conditions that it needs. So the saxifrages are a group of, I want to say a little bit fewer than 450 species. The name of this group of plants, saxifrage, actually means rock breaker. They're a great plant for alpine gardens, rocky crags, sandy soil, things like that. They do very well with very minimal soil and a rocky aspect. They're also called rockfoils. These plants are characterized by being low growing, mounding. Most of them are evergreen, and then they shoot up little open flowers that come in colors from white to, you can see this one is a really brilliant pinky red. They're open, they're easy for pollinators to access. I've talked in the past about how you want those open flowers so that your pollinators can get in there easily and get access to the nectar and the pollen. They make a really lovely, slowly mounding, spreading ground cover plant. And again, evergreen. So here's some circumstances under which I want to grow this plant. There are saxifrages that like full sun, and there are ones that like partial shade. This one likes shade. It's really important that you notice the difference, because you will get one that is sunburned and dying in a heartbeat if it's one that's meant to be in shade and you grow it in full sun. Saxifrages, they aren't that big of a plant, so I bought a whole bunch of plugs so I can put a few of them around the garden, and then you can dig them up and divide the clumps to multiply them. The soil needs to be well draining and can be quite poor, although they can handle being amended with compost. But what they don't do well with is extended long periods of no moisture. So if you're going to plant this plant and you're going to be successful, you're going to want to make sure, if you have really long dry spells, that you water it. And the way that I ensure success with my saxifrages is that I plant them underneath other plants that I water with a watering can. So I put it in a place I'm already going to be watering. That way I know this plant will get a drink and won't dry out and die. So let me show you where I'm planting some of these today. So right here I have a Akebia quinata cutting that I took and rooted. If you look up here, I have an Akebia on the back of my shed, and it has crept around the front. This is Akebia quinata. I have Akebia trifoliata in a different place. This will be full of stunning purple flowers very shortly. And I have this big pergola here, and I wanted some more plants growing up over it, and I thought, let me just take a cutting of my Akebia because I love it so much and get another one going. So they root really easily. I didn't have any topsoil back here. This is an area that was just sand with a layer of gravel over it. And in order to have this covered pergola area and not have to put in poured concrete, which would require a permit, and I didn't want to invest in pavers, putting down sand and then cut up chunks of my driveway. Excuse the bikes, but this is where we eat, and then little stepping stones and sand and gravel. So this area here is just sand and gravel, very highly draining and not very fertile. So I went to plant this Akebia, and I just took some bricks I had sitting around, because permaculture needs to be accessible and cheap in my mind if it's going to be reproducible. I try and do everything as efficiently and cost effectively as possible. So I just took some old bricks and I put in about 3 inches of compost, and I planted my Akebia cutting, and off it has taken. So it will go up and it will cover this whole pergola. It can get 25, 30 feet long. So I thought, I water this plant, it's right at my back door, and because there's very little compost and there is such good drainage, it needs a little extra water. So when I come out and I am going to give the chickens some water, I water this plant. Great place for Saxifrage because it's not going to be dried out. Also, I don't love this look here of just these bricks. I love how the bricks get a little bit mossy. Bricks and then just this one vine. I want to have something of visual interest here. So my Saxifrage is going to provide some visual appeal here with evergreen foliage and then these spring flowers, and kind of make this bed, this tiny, tiny little bed, that much more enjoyable. And again, I feel like the more beauty I have in the garden, the more visually interesting my garden is, the more I'm going to be out in it interacting with it. So first I want to pull back my wood chips here, being careful not to ding up my Akebia. So it's planted down in here. So I'm gonna leave that alone. And as long as I'm in here, where again, just a little bit of compost, you can see it's rich with worms. I've got my hori hori, and I'm gonna loosen up this compost because my kids have kind of walked on it. And as long as I'm in a bed, I talked about this in my strawberry planting video, so you can see there's not very much soil before you start getting to the gravel. As long as I'm in my bed working it and I've pulled back the mulch, I'm gonna add some amendments. So here I have some glacial rock dust and some azomite and some extra sand, because I know that my Saxifrage is going to want that sandy, well draining soil, right? So I have minimal topsoil. I have my bricks, which serve as rocks. I have sandy, well draining soil, which my Akebia is going to appreciate this amendment of rock dust minerals as well. So I just want to work those in. I'm going to add a little bit of dressing of well-rotted chicken manure, but not too much because I don't want to make it too rich. And this also has some of the chicken's bedding that's all well rotted and broken down. Just because this bed is so small, I want to make sure that we are working on building fertility in it. But again, not too much, because neither of these plants really need a very rich soil. Okay, so I've got that in there. No extra time to work in those extra minerals. As long as I'm in the bed, let's go ahead and add it. So now I want to put in my plugs of my Saxifrage, and they will fill in. So one plant like this is going to fill in this whole area. And it will get about 3.5 to 4.5 inches tall before it sends up the flowers. So let me plant these real quick. And All right, I've got my 3 Saxifrages in the ground. Pushed the mulch back. And again, they will fill in. This whole area will become a carpet of this evergreen material and these lovely little flowers in spring that will complement my Akebia as it grows up here. So I will have visual interest on the ground as well as visual interest going up the pergola. And that way I'm maximizing my use of space, because my garden is not that big. I want to tuck beautiful, useful living things everywhere I possibly can. And I am providing a little bit more food for pollinators here, and the source of all of these lovely open-faced flowers. Some ground cover here that I know I will water because I'm going to be watering my Akebia. So I know these will be successful here in this partially shaded location with great drainage and ample water. So I hope that you consider whether Saxifrage is a good choice for your garden. If you are in the Portland area and you happen to find a source for London Pride, please leave a message in the comment section for me. I would love to know where to get some. It is a plant that I've been looking for a long time, but in the interim, I will content myself with some other saxifrages around the garden, and I appreciate y'all watching. I'm gonna keep planting. Thanks.